So, Allison, let's begin with you. And as you do in the book, give us a portrait of how intrusive, which I didn't know until I read your book, how intrusive this surveillance is and how it works.
Sure. Thank you so much for having us. I would say that the shortest answer to that question is it's incredibly, wholly, fully intrusive. Um, and to expand on that, we live in a world right now of surveillance technologies. There's pretty much no place you and I can go as individuals where we aren't in some capacity being surveilled. Much of that is to a certain degree by our own choice. For example, if we get into our car and use our GPS, we are agreeing to those terms. What our concern is in particular with this text is that we have an overwhelming amount of surveillance in our K through 12 and higher education schools. And specifically for K through 12 schools, that surveillance is happening for minors, for children under the age of 18 without their active consent. We have kind of been accustomed, we've been sort of groomed for surveillance technologies by some of those soft technologies, such as our GPS, such as QR codes that help us make looking at restaurant menus a little bit easier, such as some of the apps on our phone that make our lives feel a bit more convenient. The cost of that is that when harder and more intrusive surveillance technologies come into our worlds, and for our concern in particular, come into our classrooms, we've kind of already had the foundation laid where we're primed for that. And we might not necessarily question those technologies to the extent that they deserve.
Well, those technologies, as you point out in the book, are not marketed as surveillance systems. They're marketed as enhancements to education, enhancements to security, and just give me a picture of some of those which Bark and these other uh, digital surveillance tools. Give me a picture of what they are and how they work.
Yeah, and thank you so much for having me, Chris. Allison and I are happy to be here. And I think the easiest way to understand it is much like the rest of Silicon Valley, these education technology or edtech companies, they tend to overpromise and underdeliver. So a lot of the justifications for adding them to classrooms are things people would typically agree with, right? These tools are going to make us more secure or safe. They're going to improve learning. They're going to prepare students for the 21st century market. Some of them even advertise themselves as being more inclusive, that is more DEI compliant, because they take out the human bias or human element, is what they claim. But we notice in all these cases, they really mask more, I would argue, pernicious motives. There's a lot of money to be made by having these tools in the classroom and being able to collect data. So that's one issue. The other issue is, in addition to masking the real motive, which is making profit, they don't really deliver on a lot of these promises. We talk about in the book how even though they say that these tools are built to promote safety, they often fall short in that. There's a dearth of evidence to say that they actually improve learning. And and then there's a lot of good evidence that they actually work against the goals of DEI. So in a lot of these cases, it seems like the reasons that are given for having these ed tech tools in schools is very different than what they actually do or the real purpose by adding them to a school.
Allison, can you explain specifically, like for instance, Bark, or pick one or two of these programs and explain to us what they? Of course, they're collecting data, but what do they do within the school setting? What is their function?
Sure. So one example that's used in a lot of K through 12 classrooms is a technology called GoGuardian. GoGuardian is put onto computers, classroom laptops. So if you have, for argument's sake, a classroom where every student has assigned a laptop, it could be their own assignation that they have that particular one for the entire school year, or it could be classroom laptops and it just happens to be where the student is sitting. GoGuardian monitors their screens. It monitors all of what they're doing. And then the teacher at the front of the classroom or wherever they happen to be can be looking at the student screens during class. One argument that GoGuardian says is that this helps teachers keep students on track and therefore helps students stay on track. So it's presented as behavioral, it's presented as sort of a tool of focus. Because teachers can be looking at student screens, and then, there's a kind of a carrot and a stick element to it, which is a teacher can say, hey, you need to get off that website. That's not what we're working on. Or can look directly at a student's work and comment about what they're doing well or what might need to be adapted. It's presented as this sort of community technology for classrooms. Here's what some of the problems we find with GoGuardian. Teachers are often told that it's theirs to be reviewing. And in fact, many of the teachers that we interviewed for the book said that they believed that they were the ones doing the surveillance, that they were a little bit uncomfortable with that, but they really saw the power of surveillance in their computers. What they aren't being told or isn't being made clear is that it's actually the corporation that's doing all the surveillance. And if we're thinking particularly of K through 12 classrooms, as I noted before, this is minors data. So the very limited amount of protections that there are, digital protections to keep minors data secure, is gone once you have a technology that is put into their classroom. There's a passive acceptance of this technology. The students themselves didn't give an active acceptance of having their data gathered. It's an implied consent. And in fact, that's the language that's often used, is by using the technology, it's implied consent. And there isn't necessarily an opt-out. So we have a classroom of confusion where the teacher believes that they're in charge and that they're making a particular ethical decision when in fact they're not the ones in charge. Once something like GoGuardian grabs student data and grabs their information, it has it. There is no kind of off switch to this. And if at a time that a student maybe plugs in their personal cell phone into that device to charge it, GoGuardian now has all of that data as well because of the digital connection of these devices. One teacher that we interviewed got a little uncomfortable, was telling a story where they were a bit uncomfortable with GoGuardian, in part because the student was homesick and the teacher could still see what was happening on the screen. Like even when the student was home, out of school for a legit reason, the teacher could see the student like watching YouTube videos. And that was when she kind of thought, oh, this isn't what I thought it was. This isn't directly connected to the classroom, right? I think sometimes the conveniences of our digital technologies invite us to forget that our digital technologies can be monitored everywhere we are, not just in our classrooms. I think another example, something that's used both in K-12 and higher education, would be Turnitin. Turnitin is a program where teachers can set it up so that students submit their written work via this platform, and it sells itself, it presents itself as plagiarism detection, which I suppose on some level is true. This is the other insidious thing, is that a lot of these technologies and these corporations don't ever actually lie to you. They just kind of don't tell you the whole truth, and they leave out some really important parts. So Turnitin, yes, is a plagiarism detection software. And also, Turnitin does at least two things. One, it's teaching AI, right? So the students who are submitting their papers are giving more and more information to the development of generative AI. And then Turnitin also sells that information to advertisers and marketers so that young people's language is being analyzed and then sort of used in advertising and marketing language and kind of sold back to them. So our young people are to some extent working for this corporation. They are doing a lot of the labor and they aren't being compensated in any way. So I'd say those are sort of two really big examples that show kind of both how insidious these technologies are, how invasive they are, and how confusing they can be for those who are encouraged to use them.